Hello everyone, welcome to the second video. So in the previous video we have seen all about the course module, the introduction to the course, the total modules those we're going to cover around, and the brief overview. Now here, as I have already discussed in the previous video series, that first we are going to go ahead and work on the module 12, that is installing the components. So once the component installation is completed, after that we would be starting with your software defined data centers. So the very first thing, installing the components, we are going to work around with installing the Esxi service. So before we go ahead and install, let me tell you what exactly an Esxi server is. Esxi server, it is a hypervisor. So whenever we talk about the hypervisors, so your Esxi server is an hypervisor, and when we talk about hypervisors, we have got two types of hypervisors. That's your type 1 and type 2. There are two types of hypervisors. Now what exactly an hypervisor is? So hypervisor is a tool, a technology which helps you in creating the instances of the hardware, or in other words we can say that hypervisors are the set of tools that would help you to create the logical instances of the hardware. Now creating the logical instances, so this logical instances, or the creation of the logical instances, is called as your virtualization. Virtualization is a technology that deals with creating the logical instances of the hardware. Now how do we create this? How can we achieve this? That is with the help of the hypervisors. Now hypervisors are two types, type 1 and type 2. When we talk about type 1, it's also called as the bare metal hypervisor, and type 2 is called as hosted or OS dependent hypervisor. Example here is your Esxi. We got Zen server and many more. Okay, so bare metal hypervisors means you'll be having the hardware, and on the hardware directly the hypervisor is installed. So if I say, let's say I got if I talk about this as your hardware layer, it's going to be the hardware, and just above the hardware we are going to have a very thin layer called as your hypervisor. And above this we are going to just go ahead and create the virtual machines. Okay, so here you see that in type 1 hypervisor we do not require an operating system here. Directly it would be installed on the bare metal. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how exactly to install the Esxi service. So here I would go ahead and I'm going to use the VMware workstation. So welcome wizard, I just proceed with next, and I will just attach the CD DVD required for this. So this is our VMware Esxi 6.0 ISO. I have got it over here. So here the CD DVD is attached, and let me name it as Esxi 1. And I would just choose a location where I would exactly like to install this. So I'll just put it in the D drive, and so here the minimum hard disk that would be required is 40 GB. I'd go with let me customize this. So 4 GB is the RAM that it would require. Processor is minimum 2-core processor, and you should make sure that the VT is enabled, the virtual technology is enabled. Okay, so here I'm just going to use the private LAN segments. So here we go. So we got two options over here. So we're going to go ahead with the standard installer, and the booting starts. So here before, if we talk up to the version ESX, that was in the previous versions we used to call it as the ESX. So where the ESX was using Linux kernel was used. So that point of time VMware did not have its own kernel. Now if you are since from the time it has become ESXi, from that point of time VMware is using its own proprietary kernel, but again the kernel is based on the Linux. And the file system that the VMware ESXi uses is called as vmfs, stands for virtual machine file system, and the latest version that we have got for a vmfs is 5.0. So later on in the further videos we will study in depth about the file system. So let's wait for the installation to get completed. So it wouldn't take much time. So here you see on the welcome wizard, so welcome to ESXi. So you can just go ahead and press enter to continue. The end user license agreement, where to accept you have to go ahead and press F11, and you see here that it is scanning for the available devices over here. So after the scanning of the devices, you see that here it is showing you the local storage. So local storage, which we have attached as the 40 GB hard disk drive. So that has been shown over here, and you see here the star mark that says as contains a VMFS partition. Okay, so as I already told you, the VMFS is a file system. It's a proprietary file system for VMware. So here is a remote storage, shows as none, because as of now we have not attached any SAN storage. No SAN storage have been attached as of now. So I will just go ahead and press enter to continue. The default keyboard, I'll go with US default, and you could select whichever you want. Root user password. So here by default the user is being taken as a root. The reason behind that is, again here the kernel of ESXi. The kernel of ESXi is purely based on RHEL. That's the reason it is by default picking up as the user root. Here I would go ahead and give the root user password. So this password, this is a password that will be used at the time of managing the ESXi, or you can say the configuration and the management time. This is the password that we will be using ahead. This is gathering the additional information or gathering the additional system information. So here is where it goes ahead and check about all the available components and the working of the components, or in other terms you can say that the functioning of the components has been checked over here. And I would just go ahead and say F11 to install. Very easy installation, no rocket science in the installation. So once the installation is completed, then after that it will ask you to reboot, and after the reboot we'll get a very beautiful console over here to work with the ESXi server. And the console that we are going to get, over here is your COS. We call it as console operating system. But the console operating system again is a virtual machine that runs in the backend, a default virtual machine. Anyways, about that COS we'll talk in the next video series, where we are going to talk about introduction to ESXi. So here the installation is almost completed, 90% done. Okay, so you can see here the installation is successfully completed and is asking for the reboot. Just go ahead and press enter for the reboot. So here you see it says that's running vpxa start. So vpxa is nothing but it is the management agent for ESXi service. Okay, so here it is booted up, it is installed, and the rebooting is done. So this console that you see right in front of you, this console that you see here, this is nothing but your console operating system. And this console operating system is actually a virtual machine that runs in the backend. So this is a default virtual machine that gets created whenever you install an ESXi service. And the thing is that you cannot see this particular virtual machine. This is completely this virtual machine is a Linux virtual machine that gives you the management console called as the COS. So next video we're going to explore about the ESXi components. Thank you.